Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, depending where you are connecting from. Welcome to Chatham House Online. This meeting is on the record and is live streamed simultaneously on the Chatham House website, so don't forget to share on social media. I am thrilled to host today Vice Admiral Andrew Lewis, the commander of the United States Second Fleet, as well as the commander of NATO Joint Force Command Norfolk. For what I know will be a very fascinating discussion on transatlantic security and the wider European Arctic. Before leaving the floor to Admiral Lewis, I am happy to welcome Chatham House Director Robin Niblett for introductory remarks. We will then proceed with an opening statement by Admiral Lewis, followed by a curated Q&A, and we will continue this event with questions from the audience. We encourage participation through the Q&A function on your Zoom device, and in the interest of time, please stay short and pithy in your questions. So let's get right to it. Robin, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mathieu. Pleasure to be here and to be with everyone on this call. And let me add your words of welcome to Vice Admiral Lewis. Super that he would join us so early after the initial launch, I suppose, into initial operational capability of the Joint Forces Command in Norfolk. The fact that we now have, once again, a key operational command for NATO in the United States and jointly located with the Second Fleet, I think is of great symbolic as well as operational meaning. And sitting as we are in the UK, another maritime nation, relatively proximate, therefore, to that new command, it feels especially important. So all I wanted to say at the moment is just, I suppose, a couple of words of context from my perspective about the importance of this development and therefore why I'm looking forward so much to the Vice Admiral's remarks shortly. As a long-term observer, at the very least, of transatlantic security, it struck me that in the last 7 to 8, 9 years, probably, maybe 10, Russia in particular, under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, has consciously decided to raise the stakes in the security competition in the North Atlantic area, not just on the continent of Europe, but more broadly across the North Atlantic. If you're sitting in the Kremlin, there's a logic to this to reassert Russia's position as a great power, and one that is able to reassert its presence and its ability to get others to react to it by raising the temperature, should we say, raising the temperature a little bit with the nature of its exercises in Northern Europe, which led, I would say, to some of the counter reactions of forward deployments of US and other NATO forces in the Baltics, in Central and Eastern Europe, an extensive modernization program and a change of doctrine in Russian forces as well to make them much more credible in their capacity to, from their perspective, defend Russia against external threats. I think from a Western perspective and a NATO perspective, strengthening these capabilities so they can keep pressure on NATO in general. And there's no greater area that needs to have NATO's focus on than the Atlantic area more broadly. Climate change has raised the importance of the Arctic. It's raised the importance of the High North. Whatever happens with the world meeting its climate targets, energy resources in the Barents Sea and other parts of the North Atlantic are going to be incredibly important for at least the next 20 to 30 years. And the capacity, therefore, to deter and defend any kind of malign action in that area is enormously important to all NATO members. I could add in, of course, the very important digital cable interconnections across the Atlantic as well that are part of the lifeblood of the global economy, but also the interconnectivity between the United States and Europe and other parts of the world. I could say just quickly to close up my remarks, a couple of words about China and the kind of shifting global context, because obviously China is a country that is also developing its naval capabilities extensively. These are concentrated for the moment in their region, in the Indo-Pacific and Northeast Asia, the South China Sea. But its capacity and China's capacity to have more of a global presence is one that I think NATO needs to be ready for. Not that it necessarily is an adversarial position, but it's at least one that, from my perspective, we need to be ready for. At the very least, as Europeans, we need to be ready to share the burden more proactively with the United States, as the Vice Admiral and others of his colleagues are trying to weigh up America's global presence. And we know that many Europeans will not have the capacity to share a similar level of presence in East Asia. It's all the more important that we're capable in a very real and meaningful way to contribute to defense and deterrence in the North Atlantic area. And this Joint Forces Command is a critical part of that. And I suppose my last point I want to say of this is a UK comment, as we're talking, or at least I'm talking from London. I think this command is a reminder of how important it will be for the United Kingdom to invest even more in its NATO role over the coming years. I believe we already have Rear Admiral Andrew Betton serving as a deputy to Vice Admiral Lewis, reflecting the role of Allied Maritime Command in the UK on a day-to-day basis. But again, it's a reminder of the importance of all of Europe, UK included, playing its correct role at this time. So I think I will leave it there. Again, let me add my words of welcome, Mathieu, to yours, to Vice Admiral Lewis. Fantastic that he would join us at such an early moment of the new Joint Forces Command's launch, and very much look forward to his remarks.
Thank you very much, Robin, for your opening remarks. And this frames the discussion really well. And I'm sure we will come back to your points during the discussion and the Q&A. Without further ado, Admiral Lewis, the floor is yours for some introductory remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew, and Robin. Thank you for the for your remarks at teeing things up. Just a couple of things for context from me, and I'll go into a little bit of the near history of Second Fleet and JFC Norfolk, just to lay the groundwork. But a number of years ago, I did an exchange tour with the Royal Navy in early 1990s, just right after Operation Desert Storm, and operated from Yeovilton, and much of the operational pieces that we did, and tactically on the two deployments I did, were under a NATO umbrella. The one most memorable was the first, crisis management type of deployment, was where we were flying over Bosnia in 1993 and 1994, in my second deployment. So just for context on my personal experience, and then as a two-star, I attended the UK Pinnacle course. It was held at Northwood, and the keynote speakers of note for the were this guy named Stu Peach, who I think you probably know and has a pretty big role in NATO still, and the Chatham House presentation, and that the whole week-long course was focused on the Russia, the Russian culture and Russian from a security standpoint. And I learned a tremendous amount on, and this was in 2016, I did this course, and it was really, kind of awakened my thinking, and as much of the thinking that was going on and in NATO and throughout our individual governments as well, in regards to Russia as things were going forward. And that accelerated my knowledge personally, and I was really in awe of the fact that Chatham House would be even interested in talking to me. So I really appreciate the offer to come and speak with you today. Thirdly, over the course of the last 2 years in my current roles, I have learned a tremendous amount about NATO as an organization, and how from a military, from a security standpoint, from a global security standpoint, what an amazing, effective, powerful organization that has literally assured security, prosperity, and democracy globally over the last over 70 years. Really, since the end of the Second World War, this organization has done some phenomenal things and will continue to do some phenomenal things because it's a thinking organization that remakes itself to fit the security environment in which we find ourselves in. And where that is now, I would call a NATO 3.0. NATO 1.0 being the classic Cold War, singular focus on deterrence in regards to the Soviet Union, and NATO 2.0 being much, kind of post mid 90s and after the fall of the wall and Cold War ending, so to speak, where it was more of a crisis management organization and very effective in that way. And as you all know, that Article 5 has only been invoked one time, and that was when the United States was attacked in 2001 on September 11th, and that continues to this day. And now, but NATO 3.0, which is more of a hybrid of those two, one axis being deterrence and being prepared for defense, and the other axis still maintaining the crisis management capability. So that's just from a foundational standpoint, a little bit about the command standing up. We reestablished, the U.S. Navy made the determination to reestablish the U.S. Second Fleet here in Norfolk. In August of 2018 is when I came here, 24th August 2018. The command is fully operational, capable, has been for almost a year now. And we have been operating at a high-end tactical level, what I would call high-end tactical level, for pretty consistently, or very consistently, and been pretty busy, especially at the moment. We were pretty busy. With JFC Norfolk, we reached initial operational capability on the 17th of September of this year, and then shortly thereafter, I traveled to Brussels and Mons and to the UK to do, but in Mons to do the memorandum of understanding signing ceremony, which is the first time one had been done in Mons in 12 years. Pretty significant event, I think, and that was pretty exciting to be a part of. And when I traveled to the UK, I met with the First Sea Lord, and I met with the leadership, both on the UK military side in Northwood and their joint side, and as well as Maritime Command with Keith Blount there in Northwood. It was really, and that's when I met Matthew, and we discussed this engagement. I'm really excited about talking about the commands. I really, Robin, you mentioned that having an operational command back in North America. This is actually under the NATO command structure, the first time there has been an operational command established in North America. Previous commands were strategic commands, the old Strategic Atlantic Command, and a tactical command previously at Second Fleet. But this being the third operational command within NATO command structure, the other two being in Brunson and Naples. So it's really exciting to be a part of this historically, and more importantly, I think it's a really significant event in the maturation, the further maturation of NATO and NATO 3.0 as we implement the NATO military strategy, and the framework of that implementation is under the deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic region. And we just had a commanders conference just yesterday with General Walters and the ACO leadership to further those steps forward. And I'm looking forward to the next several months and year when we'll be fully operational capable. And but we're not waiting for that date to happen. We're fully immersed in the mission now, and I strongly believe that it's contributing to the overall awareness, situational understanding, and coordination within NATO that leads to deterrence, that's end state, is that perpetual end state of deterrence. With that, I thank you again for the invitation, and I look forward to have your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral, for your presentation. And I really like this idea of a NATO 3.0, that a NATO that is very nimble and quick to adapt to the challenge at hand. And this is particularly relevant in the face of Russian aggression in Ukraine and this post-2014 NATO response to Russian aggression. The broader question in this context would be, what has changed in the North Atlantic regarding the Joint Force Command Norfolk sort of area of communication and area of operation? What has changed in the North Atlantic and further to Arctic security that really does require a new NATO command and the reactivation of a standing US fleet? And what are the implications, in a way, for North Atlantic security and collective defense within the alliance?
So that's a very good question. And there's some things that have changed and some things that we just pretended like never stopped happening. To cover those first, we had this false sense of security that the Russians had decided they were no longer a global power, and that they were no longer interested in anything outside of their immediate region. I don't think that ever happened. And the Russians have been continuing to consider themselves a global power, not just in their near abroad, but literally globally. And where that has really played out to a very large degree is in the Atlantic Ocean, and underneath, in the undersea domain specifically. The Russians are very capable, and they have continued to increase their capability. Their capacity is not what it once was, but their capability is better than it used to be. And they have maintained a focus in the purely, in the purely military sense, in the undersea, which is not a transparent zone. You can't see. There's a lot that goes on in the undersea that we don't chart and that we're unaware of. And as Robin highlighted earlier, the vast majority of information flow between the two continents, not just to Europe, but back from North America to Europe and back. We cannot allow that to be severed, that economic and that information highway, if you like, that runs on the seabed. That has changed to some degree. That our reliance. I mean, just now, what we're doing right now is relying upon those communications cables that run in the undersea, and the Russians are out and about doing bad things, potentially with those assets on the undersea, those free world assets on the undersea. That is what has changed a little bit, I think, and is continuing to change, is the Arctic, and into the reaches of the Arctic, just from a purely more time and space, that is where we have navigable waters, and the fact that all of the Arctic nations are friends, with the exception of one, but everybody else we're friendly with. most are NATO countries, but the two that are not NATO countries are very closely aligned with NATO, and so that the Arctic is in a changing environment, and one in which we need to be able to operate there, and we need to be able to deter but not provoke the Russians, because they are an Arctic nation as well and have a right to freedom of the seas and freedom of maneuver and all the things that are allowed and from a legal standpoint. They absolutely are entitled to those, and we should respect that.
Thank you very much. And further to this, there's been a lot of discussions for the past few months around the security issues around the GUG gap or the GIN gap, for instance, about North Atlantic sea line of communication and the creation of potentially contested environments beyond the North Atlantic. How do you see in a way, the security implications for the North Atlantic and for the Arctic as well, in terms of operations, in terms of the main challenges as you see it today from your in a way your double endeavor at the level of the U.S. fleet and JFC Norfolk?
So if you obviously the international waters and international airspace above the water is just that. It's international waters, and so there's law of the sea. There's internationally recognized norms of that space. So that reaches across the Atlantic through choke points, as in the GIUK gap, as you mentioned, into the Arctic itself and the high north, what we call it, and also obviously on the other side of Greenland, and in this region, in this part of the globe, where that is also falls under those same norms of international behavior. What we are committed to, both in the U.S. and in NATO, is maintaining that international agreed upon norms of operating in those regions, and through those choke points where we approach the strategic zones of various nations, and specifically those strategic zones that are very sensitive are the UK's, the US's, Russians, and the French, and that is something that is where constant communications with our allies, constant coordination with our allies in order to ensure freedom of the seas, and being in a position, if deterrence fails, to be able to control the seas. But if we do the competition right, we talk about great power competition and operations in baseline activities. If we do that right, winning is defined as deterrence, and then we don't get beyond that. It's a perpetual state of deterrence, which is what I think is it's more than aspiration. That's our intent, as certainly as NATO's intent and the United States' intent as well.
That's pretty much the conundrum between sea control and sea denial, I think, which will be a big part of your internal soul searching at JFC Norfolk, probably. Can we talk a little bit more about the sort of day-to-day work and basis for JFC Norfolk? How do you reconcile the broader strategic discussions at NATO level that we have around North Atlantic and increasingly about the Arctic with your everyday military practice and capabilities? Namely, how do you reconcile strategy with the operational level and your day-to-day responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of touched on this in my opening remarks, that the NATO military strategy. Well, actually, to go back a little bit further, what made the determination was the NAC approval of the NATO command structure adaptation, which created formally Joint Force Command Norfolk, and it also created JSEC in Ulm, Germany, and it added personnel to a number of commands, notably MARCOM and Northwood got plussed up pretty significantly, and it was because of these, the security environment that we were seeing, that NATO was seeing, and NATO's. But after that came out, there was a NATO military strategy that was written and published. It's classified, but overall, it's a recognition of the Russian threat, of the Russian as a competitor, Russia as a competitor, and it's also recognition of terrorists continuing to be a threat, and a threat to the NATO nations. And so that's why it kind of translated to the what we call affectionately NATO 3.0, where you've got two axes there. But the main thing for me, and the main thing for Joint Force Command Norfolk, is that deterrence and axis of this, of the mission. My focus is more on that, almost exclusively on that, over the crisis management piece. And so for application of this strategy, this is what the deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic has given us direction on how to build out the operational commands and their focus. And specifically, SACEUR is giving us strategic guidance in that, and the strategic guidance is applicable in day-to-day operations, all the way up to crisis in the AOR, in the region. So that's really important to get that strategic direction understood and carried out in how we do it in our day-to-day activities and operational command. And we're pretty lucky here at Joint Force Command Norfolk, because this is why it was established, was to get into that space. So I don't have to shift focus at all, like my fellow commanders are having to do to some degree, even the single service components.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that JFC North was a multinational joint command. Which nations do you see have a particular role in that endeavor, and how do you see the integration of specific capabilities from individual NATO countries, but also cooperation with allies such as Sweden and Finland in this environment?
Yeah, so I'm really pleased with participation of the NATO nations. So this command is a hybrid organization in that it's partially NATO command structure and NATO force structure. And what that means is, that there's an inner core of it, a pretty small part of the command, which is potentially fully represented by all 30 nations of NATO. Whereas the NATO force structure part of the command is focused on under a memorandum of understanding, which I mentioned earlier. And so we have 16 nations now that are represented with staff officers at Joint Force Command Norfolk. Additionally, we're looking at getting liaison officers from Sweden and Finland as well. Broadly, what I would call the geographical command network is starts from North America geographically, so it's the US, Canada, across Denmark, Iceland, Norway, and then the classic Atlanticist and those militaries with strategic forces, the UK and France, and then down into the Baltics, Poland, Germany, and the classic Atlanticist is in Spain, Portugal. That's broadly the network of geographic nations. But I'm always looking for extras too. But because it's that swath of geography that is primarily maritime, but not exclusively. That's where my focus is, and I've been really pleased with the way we're organized. At Second Fleet, I've got a vice commander who's a Canadian 2-star, and then I have an exchange officer, a Norwegian, Brit, and a French officer. This is in my Second Fleet command, which is a multinational, not a NATO command, but a multinational. With JFC Norfolk, my flag officer leadership, my deputy is a Royal Navy 2-star UK, and then my operations 1-star is Norwegian. My planning 1-star is French. My support 1-star, who is the personnel and the logistics and the command and control systems, is Danish. And then my chief of staff is alternating between Germany and Spain. My first chief of staff is German. That's kind of the flavor of the leadership here as well.
Excellent, thank you. One final question before we open the floor to the audience. We were recently sort of discussing the fact that JFC North is in a walking phase in a way. It's not fully running yet because it will reach operational capabilities in late 2021. What does the road ahead look like in a way? And where do you want to see JFC Norfolk in 5 years, for instance?
Yeah. So although we are in a walking phase, it doesn't really feel like that to the 85 people that we have here on board. They're at a pretty hefty trot, if not a run already. We are in a week's time. We're going to go into our training and preparation for an exercise that happens in the late spring. Well, it culminates in the late spring. It's called Steadfast Defender, and that is a big exercise for both Joint Force Command Norfolk and JSEC, and it's going to be a lot of attention on that by the senior NATO leadership, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So that is really occupying a lot of our internal training and going forward, and then I think from there we'll be at that point we'll be really up on plane, if you like, and just continuing to march toward our full operational capability. I do not see any barriers to reaching that full operational capability in the next year. In 5 years' time, I see Joint Force Command Norfolk. I know this is Chatham House rules don't apply here, but I would say that I think that it probably needs to be on a rank level with the other Joint Force Command Norfolk. So I'm a 3-star in the U.S. system, and so my Joint Force Command counterparts in Brunson and Naples are both 4-stars. And although it doesn't hinder my doing what I need to do, but it does, there's kind of an extra step in the process, and that's a military challenge to some degree, but not completely unique to the military. And we're hierarchical organizations, and ranks have meanings in that regard. But other than that, functionally, I see that the role of JFC Norfolk being probably dual-hatted with my boss on the U.S. side rather than dual-hatted with Second Fleet. That's how I would see it in the future. But fully in operations, where I see it is where the command is, fully functioning and deterring, awareness, understanding, deconfliction, coordination, interoperability, integration, and even interchangeability across the Atlantic. And if you think from where you are in London, if you think about up and out, it would be, south and west. And I think of it the same way, up and out from here, which kind of lands in the middle of the Atlantic. And what that does is it makes the operational dilemma for any adversary, be it the Russians or potentially or any other adversary, and then it pulls it away from both continents into an area where we can exercise our freedom of maneuver operational. It's probably a little bit more than you wanted to hear, but that's how I see it.
We should have projected a map to show the vision, but it does create a good north-south continuum as well. It's not just about this east-west link, right? It's also about the north-south continuum, and I think this really is it. Thank you very much, sir, for your answers. Let's jump right to it with the questions from the audience, because they've been rushing in, and I will try to address them. We will try to address them all, and we have a little less than an hour, which leaves plenty of time. And I'll also try to group them as well. We have two questions that I will group from Duncan the Pledge and Mehmet Kinaj from NATO ACT. It's good to have you here, colleagues. And they relate to China, which is the other elephant in the room that we have not addressed. And the questions are, what is the prospect of a Chinese military presence in the Arctic in the next 10 to 20 years? And further to this, what is the potential of cooperation and or competition between Russia and China in their activities in the Arctic? And my third question, in a way, would be, the so what? What does it mean for us? And what does it mean for Joint Force Command, Norfolk, and NATO as a whole?
Yeah, that's a multi-part question, but I'll. But so I think you referenced a moment ago, Matthew, with we traditionally look at the an east-west from a threat vector, where we talked about this before. There's a north-south to piece, going up over the North Pole through the Arctic, and that therein lies. There's where the China as a potential adversary becomes. They're very open about their aspiration to be a near Arctic nation. I have no idea what that actually means, but they are aggressively trying to operate in the Arctic, whether it be from a scientific standpoint or a exploration of metals and other things in the Arctic or protein, which is obviously a big thing with the Chinese as far as their fishing is concerned, and a concern to I think globally from an environmentalist standpoint. I don't. I think we will see, China more and more present in the region, in this half of the globe. I think it will creep into existence, much like their Belt Road Initiative has done in the southern part of in the warmer climates. I think they will try to do the same thing. They're already trying to do the same thing. I don't think that we're going to see too much of beyond transactional relationship between China and Russia. I just think there's no way they're going to be an alliance, and the more in my opinion, that I think is very unlikely. I do think, though, if we want to guarantee an unruly Arctic, what we will do is not operate there, not be present there. So we really have to be present. I think I may have mentioned this to you before, and I'm sure some in the audience have read Admiral Stavridis's book Sea Power of about a year or two ago. There's a chapter 2, I think, in the book. It's about the Arctic, and it makes a really compelling discussion about that it's the one area, maritime area, that we have not had major conflict, and aspirationally, the intent of the Arctic nations and the free world is to maintain that as a cooperative area in which the rule of law applies. That is the best case scenario, is to maintain that. And that's what we intend to do as the Arctic nations. And I think the Arctic nation leadership, has been consistent with that over the years. And I think we're going to see that more and more to be front and center with a lot of countries.
Thank you very much. Let's take 2 questions concerning capabilities. I got 2 that will join together. The first one being, how willingly do the allied European countries contribute to capabilities of JFC Norfolk? Or is it substantially a US effort only? And further to that, what areas do you identify in terms of capabilities as need to invest in? Is it maritime patrol, for instance, or maritime domain awareness, or strict warfighting capabilities? Thank you.
As far as contribution by NATO, where I see it right now is, because NATO, the NATO force that makes up are the nation's forces. So but as far as contribution to the command, contribution to the what we're trying to put in place, what we're putting into place in the command, it's been tremendous support by the nations of NATO. I mean, to include, it was this summertime when we were having difficulty getting people anywhere, transferred into places, and things were pretty much at a standstill. The Norwegian military chartered an airplane to fly, 10 of their new check-ins that were coming to this command to get them here and get them working. So I mean it's been really pretty eye-watering, the support of the nations have had for the command. It's been very impressive. As far as capabilities, I think that the capabilities of all the nations are adequate and very good. The beauty of NATO, the 30 nations of NATO, is there's small countries and there's large countries, and there's the U.S. has got lots of ships and lots of real what we would call high-end capability, whether that be carrier strike group operations or submarine warfare or ballistic missile defense ships. So those kinds of things. We've got a considerable amount of that. But then there's countries that have a much smaller military, much smaller Navy that are really, really expertise in certain areas like mine clearance, where the Germans and the Baltic nations are very strong in mine clearance and amphibious operations, and there's organizations within NATO that are not NATO, or not within NATO, but are contributors to NATO's mission. There's the JEF, that is a Joint Expeditionary Force, which is framework nation is the UK, and that bring considerable capability. So really, it's managing that capability in a coherent manner is what we need to do, and that's really one of the big pieces of what we're doing with General Walter's strategic guidance going forward under DDA.
Absolutely, and streamlining existing endeavors is a good way to take stock of capabilities instead of reproducing them. Thank you for two excellent questions from Vincenzo Camparini and Julian Pavlak. Let's jump to two other questions specifically on the relationship between Joint Force Command Norfolk and US Northcom and EUCOM. A question from Derek West on your relationship specifically with the US Northcom. And a more provocative question from Andrea Charon. Thanks for connecting today. What are the challenges and advantages of straddling US Northcom and EUCOM, as it were? Thank you.
Those are really good questions. So so the first one. So not to go in too great a detail with the U.S. command structure, but it's important to understand in the context of reestablishing the Second Fleet, because in so doing, my administrative chain of command, the people that kind of pay the bills and keep the lights on and all that kind of thing, is Fleet Forces Command, who is also Naval Forces North, so the naval component for Northcom. And so but operationally, I can work for Northcom through Naval Forces Northern Command, or I can work for EUCOM through Naval Forces Europe. So either way, it's just I just get assigned a mission as Second Fleet, and then that in essence can help me to straddle that Mid-Atlantic region. And I have a very tight relationship with my counterpart, the Sixth Fleet Commander on the U.S. structure, Vice Admiral Gene Black, and so we talk daily on some things, at least by email for sure, but I talked to him several times this week already on operational issues. So there are certainly challenges to straddling that line across the Atlantic. But what is in essence is it's forcing us to be closer teammates, which is important in order to best get after the mission. Now, my Joint Force Command Norfolk hat, I am more akin to what I would call a component within the broader SAC-URS region. So SAC-URS region, stretching essentially from the NATO region, from basically the North Pole to the south, the Tropic of Capricorn, with the entire Atlantic, all down into the Caribbean, and up into the Arctic. So huge part of the world. It's about half the globe, in essence, and much of that is maritime. And so in my Joint Force Command Norfolk hat, if you like, I'm really, really focused on the Atlantic through the GI-UK gap into the Arctic. So I'm kind of in support of myself with Second Fleet. In fact, a lot of the I mentioned Steadfast Defender earlier. that we are using that exercise as certification exercise for Second Fleet under U.S. structure, but also as a maritime component commander with MARCOM's oversight for certification as a NATO MCC, and then for JFC Norfolk as an operational command level. So it's the real challenges is a lot of it comes down to, it's a challenge for me because I'm a commander at two different levels, one at operational command and one at a high-end tactical command, if you like. But I think we're making some really good inroads. I think we can do more. I think ultimately we can do more. And I referenced this earlier. I think the naval forces, NORTHCOM, if that individual were dual-hatted with Joint Force Command, Norfolk, then that relationship becomes, that was there's one less step in the process. You can go to 4-star to 4-star on the Navy side, 4-star to 4-star on the NATO side. That just cuts out the middleman.
Exactly. It's all about communication.
That's right.
Let's take a really interesting question concerning climate-related and climate change from Katarina Kertiseva from ELN in London. What is NATO doing to protect its own staff and its infrastructure against climate change in a way? And what are the steps taken against the sea level rise? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The first part of that question was, what is NATO doing to protect its staff? Is that what you said? And
infrastructure, yes, specifically to the endeavor of JFC Norfolk.
Oh yeah, So I mean, once again, this goes back to capabilities, if you like, and so the capabilities of NATO are the capabilities of the nation, the contributing nations of it. So JFC Norfolk being a framework nation of the United States, as the framework nation and the host nation, what we're doing here in the headquarters staff is the same thing that we're doing with all the other, to include ACTUs on the same campus, as well as the U.S. Navy organizations that are here, and it is everything from disaster preparedness, and I mean Norfolk itself is below sea level. Much of it is landfill anyway. So we even if there was no rising tides or anything like that, which there is, we still flood all the time. We've always have, and so that's a little bit of a challenge. But there are some things locally that are going on that are proving effective. The other thing that we are doing here is militarily, from a preparedness standpoint, we've had a very active hurricane season this year, and that whether it's climate change related or not doesn't really matter. We've just had a very active hurricane season. We just had another Category 5 or 4 hurricane run ashore in Honduras yesterday, and that's caused widespread damage and loss of life. What we do here, because in my Second Fleet hat, I'm responsible for hurricane preparedness for under my boss, to be prepared to respond, whether that be response to civilian, response to out of area, or just making sure that the fleet and its capability stays intact. And so we've and in this year with the mission assurance challenges with COVID, we've had a ready ship, usually a large deck amphibious ship, ready from June until the season officially ends in about 2 weeks' time, and that has been a pretty heavy lift for in preparedness for that, and it's been going pretty well, but it's really been a lot that goes into that. Those are specific pieces of what we do at our level, but beyond that, it's much what the individual nations are doing and the communities are doing of the militaries.
Thank you. Let's go back to other challenges and go back to the Russia challenge. And one of the key questions that keeps us all awake at night is how much NATO do we need and want in the Arctic for fear of antagonizing Russia? A question from Dmitry Tulupov from the St. Petersburg State University. Which confidence building measures you think are necessary and timely for Russia and the West to be implemented in the Arctic and North Atlantic region? And is it worth establishing a sort of new forum, or is it better to sort of hunker down what we already have in terms of, for instance, a military code of conduct for the Arctic, or concerning declarations of military security specifically to the Arctic? Thank you.
I think, well, I don't think that we need to have new organizations, associated with the Arctic. I mean, I think the Arctic Council is a cooperative body that can establish the policies and then if we just use the same behavior there militarily and security wise that we do in any other region, I think there's not really a need for new organizations. The specific challenges, though, about operating, if you like, or being physically present in the Arctic, is the Arctic is changing. There's no question about that. But one thing that isn't changing is it's a very dangerous environment. Whether it's solid ice flows or breaking up ice flows, these are very dangerous things, especially to ships. The logistics trains, if you like, are tremendous. The distances are vast, and our equipment, the vast majority of our equipment, the U.S. equipment, is not optimized for that environment anymore. We used to design and operate in cold, higher latitudes much more than we have done in the last 20 years. So part of it's just basics of in the Navy, seamanship, airmanship, basic functions of safely operating. That's really important, obviously. And then related to that is because of the hot, longer season of navigable waters and the higher latitudes, well, we're having an uptick in in ecotourism, adventurism, which the bill associated with that is search and rescue. It falls on the nations that are Arctic nations, and that many of which are very small in their capability and capacity. I mean, the last time I was in Iceland, that was something that we touched on quite a bit. I mean, the number of people that were coming through and they were having a rescue that would kind of overexpose themselves and they got stranded and they had to get picked up by the authorities from a search and rescue standpoint. That's all safety of life at sea. That's all those are international norms that we all sign up to and we all operate that way. And so those are the things that, why it's necessary to be present from a military standpoint is to be a contributor to the stability operations. It's not to be provocative in that regard at all.
Let's stay on the Russia challenge for two more questions that I will group as well, from Ian Bond and Kevin Brynd, specifically concerning Russia A2AD capabilities. Is it a real concern? Is it exaggerated? And how important is it in a way for NATO and the EU to work together on reinforcing military mobility, for instance, and access to contested environments. And further to this, if we go subsurface, as you were mentioning, concerning Russian capabilities in the undersea domain, what options do we have to deter Russia from threatening, transatlantic submarine cables? Thank you.
So yeah, is the A2AD threat real? Absolutely, it's real, and it is something that we have, from in term of art pieces, we have to be able to exercise sea denial in a A2AD environment. In other words, we have to be able to operate there freely, and if required or necessary, be able to defend ourselves or commit, or execute naval warfare, if the case may be, or warfare inside of the A2AD bubble. We mentioned Sweden and Finland a little bit ago, and they both have very close relationship with NATO, obviously, but also unique relationship with Russia, and different unique relationships themselves, but different between one another. One of the things that Sweden we've learned a lot from Sweden is, particularly operating in the Baltic, is they never stopped operating inside that what is a pretty an A2AD environment, and they know how to operate there. They're tactically sound in that region for sure, and there's a lot to learn from that. One of the things that I commanded an exercise called Ball Tops in 2019, and the way I looked at it then was three things that needed to be maintained. One, they were partnership, presence, and professionalism. What I meant by that at the time was, and it's applicable in the Arctic or anywhere else too, is if you look about, we got to learn from our partners. We have to learn how to coordinate and coordinate and interoperate with our partners. Presence, there's no substitute for actual presence. And professionalism is, professional adherence to international norms, and that will, I think, depressurize any situation if you kind of look at it through that lens. And I'm sorry I started yammering too much, but what was the second part of the question?
No, it's really interesting. And the second question was about undersea domain, and specifically, how can we deter Russia from threatening transatlantic submarine cables?
Yeah, the knowing that we're aware of that, what they're doing and what they're pretty transparent about it. The Russian underwater reconnaissance program is an unclassified, they tell us what they're doing, but there's nefarious potential there that concerns us, and it's something that we need to be aware of, and we can do things diplomatically, and that where there's unprofessional behavior that goes on associated with some of these assets that we see from time to time, and that happens every now and again. And to those undersea cables, the vast majority of which are privately owned, are something that is very important to the world's economy, and as well as just the connectivity of the globe. So that being open about that is really important, I think. and from a messaging standpoint, I think that's the thing we can do, is be very open about that.
Thank you very much. Let's take a question more specifically on Marcom. A question from Christian Otland. How do you see the sort of relationship and division of labor, as it were, between JFC Norfolk and NATO's Maritime Command, Marcom in Northwood? For instance, in terms of situational awareness, training and exercise, day-to-day operations in the maritime domain and beyond. Jim, I know you're listening, and I'll get to your questions a bit later. Thank you.
Yeah, the relationship is really good. I mean, I tell you, when we first reestablished Second Fleet, and we knew we were going to go forward with this Joint Force Command Norfolk, the first visit I made was down to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to make have a meeting and do some stuff with the second MEF. And then the next week, I flew to Naples to meet with Marcom, JFC Naples at the time, and Strike Force NATO. And we have this forum that we started then. We call it the 9-Star Forum. So it's Strike Force NATO, Marcom, and Second Fleet JFC Norfolk. And we meet regularly. And it's really been focused on command and control relationships and division of labor and planning. And I consider Vice Admiral Keith Blount to be a very good friend and warfighting partner that I trust implicitly, and I believe I own his trust as well. And there's the reason that's important. If you look at interoperability and integration, there's kind of three aspects to that. There's the people, relationships, the process, and then the kit, the capability. We tend to focus on the stuff rather than the people and the relationships and the standardized process. And that's why this command network is so important. And first amongst that command network from day one has been Marcom. And we talk regularly, and when we're kind of completing each other's sentences now, so I'm pretty comfortable with that relationship.
Excellent, thank you. And let's jump right to it with a question from Jim Bergeron from Marcom, actually, concerning the protection of the sea line of communication across the Atlantic that we talked about. How do you view this challenge in 21st century circumstances? And provocatively, is it just convoy, or is it more than convoy? Thank you. It's
much more than convoy, absolutely. I mean, I would say, in terms of, we did a fourth Battle of the Atlantic tabletop exercise a few months back, and Marcom was participant in that, as well as about 16 other commands from various nations, or more than that, 22 other commands from various nations. So the first Battle of Atlantic, First World War, Second Battle of Atlantic, Second World War, with an added twist of strategic air power that they could reach across the Atlantic to some degree in support of both U-boats and the convoys themselves. Third Battle of Atlantic being a Cold War, and that was vis-a-vis the multi-domain but not all domain. What I would say now is the fourth Battle of Atlantic it's more Cold War-like in that it's not kinetic yet and not lethal yet, but it could easily go kinetic and or lethal through invisible warfare type things, cyber, space, electronic warfare, those kinds of things. It's absolutely all domain. One of the things that we talk about here is from seabed to space, as this fourth battle Atlantic plays out. And there's one of the areas that has become very more clear to me now is if you consider the Russians or any autocratic nation in the information space, they don't have the restrictions of being truthful that those of us who are kept in check by Chatham House and other free-thinking organizations, to where we have to speak in the truth, and we do speak in the truth. They don't have that hindrance, and so it puts us at a somewhat of a disadvantage from a speed and tempo of use of the information space. And it's something that we have to be aware of, and we have to get better at. The other part of it is, as the future battle kind of lays itself out there, the traffic is incredible. The amount of physical traffic on the high seas, but more and more of that is going to be autonomous vessels, be that in the undersea, on the surface, and in the air. And there's a lot of those kinds of differences.
Thank you very much. Let's take a couple more questions. I'm conscious of time, but it's almost like we've been running you a marathon of questions, which also shows the great interest from our audience here today concerning the topic. I'd like to join sort of two questions, one from Niklas Granholm from FOE in Sweden. Hi, Niklas. How far to the east does JFC Norfolk go in a way? Does it include the Baltic Sea region? And also another question from Duncan the Pledge: how north do you go? What is the operational limit in the Arctic, specifically in Arctic waters, for this endeavor? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I go as far as I'm told to go, but what I look at it is, whether that be north and east, is I look at it as in degree of clarity. So if we talk about awareness and understanding, so I go big to small. So I start global view, regional view, and then very, very focused in a certain subset of the region. And where my primary focus is across the Atlantic, seabed to space, through the GAUK gap, and to the northern limits of SACEUR's region. That doesn't mean that I don't maintain awareness in the Baltic, in the Mediterranean, further south, the Gulf of Guinea, into the Black Sea. I maintain an awareness there, but it's a little fuzzier in my focus. But I can quickly shift to refine that if I the way that General Walters talks about it is, I'm going to pick the best athlete to be the support head commander if the need should arise. So what I'm doing is prepping myself to be the best athlete in that region to the north. And so he's got that option before him. I see that as my responsibility.
And same, I would argue, for the Baltic Sea in a way, as you implied.
Yeah.
Let's group two more questions I missed on actually Russia to get back to sort of dialogue in these complicated circumstances and confidence building measures. One question from Jørgen Stahl from the Royal Danish Defence College. Are there any communication lines or agreements on red lines, for instance, between JFC Norfolk and the Russian Northern Fleet to avoid misunderstanding? Is it something that you will be looking into in your endeavor? And if not, and if yes, How do you assess the level of communication with the Russian Northern Fleet in terms of deconfliction, incident and accident avoidance, and avoiding, of course, unwanted escalation and the risk of miscalculation? And that's a question from Carsten Friis in Norway. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. So, I mean, generally speaking, or not generally speaking, I'm not in the business of red lines. That's more at higher level, and I think probably at a political level, really, when you start talking about those things. But I could put it in how I would capture it is that in the earlier, when I gave you my 3 Ps analogy, the partnership, presence, and professionalism. So the professionalism is well known by everybody who operates. And I mean, I can tell you at the time, this is June of 2019 when we did Baltops. And prior to that time frame, there had been some, what we characterized as unprofessional, unsafe things that occurred elsewhere between U.S. forces and Russian forces, one in the Pacific, one down in the Black Sea. So I was kind of keen on this because here I was operating in the Baltic with a fairly large task force. We're doing an exercise and training, in very near to territorial waters of Russia and inside the Baltic. And we had 0 incidents of unprofessional behavior at all by either of us, obviously. And it was very professional. They were by right, coming out and taking a look at us, but it was absolutely what I would expect. So, and I would expect that to be kind of a depressurized situation too. And that's how you avoid, inadvertent conflict, is by operating in accordance with rules of the road. And there's something about on the high seas that there's maritime nations or mariners. There's kind of a common language in which you operate, and we seldom have any problems with that at the individual level. It's when it's being directed as a strategic move by one side or the other. And then the question from coming from Norway is, and as anybody from Norway recognizes, that very unique relationship with the Russians, and the really, frankly, the cooperative relationship in regards to fisheries management and in that border region, and environmental awareness, and I mean it's a pretty good model, frankly. I mean, I think that's some of the healthiest fishing grounds in the world, and it's because of there's something in it for both Norway and Russia. It's an economic boon for it, and I think they want to maintain that. I think that's good for everybody. So,
absolutely. Let's maybe take one final question from Desmond Bowen. You made the point that your command is at the operational level, and contrasted the JFC with your previous strategic command at Sakland. What difference does that shift make in terms of your responsibilities and your own freedom of maneuver in your operations? Thank you.
So what it means, back up for a minute. So there's 2 strategic commands within NATO. There's Allied Command Operations, which is SACEUR in Mons, Belgium. And there's Allied Command Transformation here in Norfolk. Those are the 2 strategic commands. There used to be more strategic commands within NATO yeah, but those went away in about 2005 timeframe, and then so so being a purely operational command, you know, I get my strategic guidance from Mons, less than from ACT. Now, to say that I don't have any relationship with ACT would be inaccurate as well, because the relationship that I have with ACT, which I'm another relationship that I'm very grateful for, is General Lanata and the entire organization at ACT has been a tremendous partner in helping us get where we are. You know, specifically on the NATO command and control network. This building and all the computers that we have here were we did it on. They just did it on out of goodwill until we got an MOU signed, and so I'm tremendously grateful for ACT's support administratively and otherwise, and we still rely upon them a lot from a legal advisor, from a financial advisor, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of support, but it's, you know, it's differently in that it's just not a strategic command, you know. So it's purely an operational command, which is more to my liking anyway. It's what I'm better suited toward.
If I may, just one quick question on capabilities, actually, and the more tactical aspects. This one slipped through the crack from Yves Germain. Will the IOC in 2021 see more US Navy naval assets being assigned specifically to the Standing Naval Maritime Group 1 and 2 for deterrence for those standing forces, further to capabilities in a way?
Yeah, that it is. Although I can't guarantee those force offerings, if you would like, but my input has been that we need to regularly contribute forces more so than we have in the past. Last year, in 2019, the U.S. commanded SNMG-1 for the year, you know, a one-star named Ed Cashman, who's now retired, but who actually came to work for me and here at JFC Norfolk and Second Fleet, and it was, I think, of tremendous value for a number of reasons. One is from the U.S. side is being able to interoperate with NATO more than we have done in recent years, and rather than forcing the rest of NATO to interoperate with us, we need to be interoperating with the rest of NATO. It's a little bit of a nuanced difference, but it's something that we really need to focus on. And then just the operational nature of the employment of both the SNMG-1 and 2 and the Mine Countermeasures Group 1 and 2, that has been becoming more and more relevant operational under the leadership of Marcom has been pretty tremendous in setting the theater, if you like. I think we need to. I think those groups play a tremendous role in maintaining deterrence, particularly, you know, in and around the continent of Europe. But as we talked about before, from an up and out standpoint, we want them over here sometimes too. SNMG-1 did do a group sail in Norfolk last year, went up to Halifax and did an express exercise across the Atlantic, which is really good. So yeah, I think we need to contribute more than we have been. And if I have my way, that'll happen. But I don't know if I'll get my way. But yeah, so I think that would be all that I would say on that one.
Thank you very much, Admiral Lewis. I think we should conclude right now because it feels like we've been running you a marathon once again early in the morning here in the United States. Admiral, thank you very much for your time and your presence with us today. And I'd like to extend thanks from Robin Niblett as well. We wish you and we wish JFC Norfolk all the best for the future of this endeavor. And we look forward to the next steps in a way in the development of the command. I would also like to thank the JFC Norfolk staff for making this event possible, and also personally thanking my colleague Anna Morgan at the Russian Asia Program for ensuring a smooth event and a smooth running of operations. Admiral, thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for connecting to Chatham House today. I look forward to welcoming you in a future occasion. Have a great day, stay safe, and over and out.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone.